Good evening and happy holidays, everybody. Welcome once again to IncrediChat. We get to do these every so often, once in a while. Life is very busy here. Check out the other ones we did. The last one we did was around Halloween with Cat Cressida. So we had some good chats about that. But here we are, December 19th, and it's the holiday season, as you can tell from my cool holiday sweater, my ugly sweater here for the Christmas season. So it's December 19th, and ironically enough, we did this December 19th of last year too. So this is kind of becoming a fun tradition. We've done these the last couple of years. So we have a great guest tonight. But before we hop to our big guest, I just want to welcome back to the IncrediChat stage my I guess former continued, I don't know what he is, partner in crime, Michael Grassia from In Toon, who is here, creator of The Wiz, creator of Plunger Pup, and all that great stuff. Welcome back, Grassia.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody.
Show some exciting, Grassia. You're like, yeah, I'm back. Whatever, it's okay. So I brought Grassia on tonight because tonight's guest I've had on. I think this is the third or fourth Christmas now we have him on. Grassia wanted to talk to him because we're going to hit all those great things that you guys all love tonight, and that is the Rankin Bass holiday specials and just a classic cartoon Christmas. So without further ado, we're going to welcome back historian of Rankin Bass, historian of all great things animation. Welcome once again, Rick Goldschmidt. Rick, how are we doing, buddy?
Hey, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
We are back. So
Yep.
Rankin Bass cartoons, all this great stuff. We talked to you last year. I know you've been doing a lot of appearances. You were just here in the New York area for Chiller Theater back in October. So that was fun. I know you've been wanting to get back out there.
Yeah.
Fill us in. What's new in the older world of Rankin Bass? I know you have your books and stuff, but there's some DVD stuff that's happening these days. That's a good thing.
Well, that's kind of a downer. Unless you're talking about
these are good things are happening.
Unless you're talking about the Blu-ray release of Mad Monster Party.
Oh,
that's a good one. Actually, that's the best Blu-ray to come out so far on any Rankin Bass title, because Umbrella pretty much put the kitchen sink in with all the extras, and they had me do the commentary and introductions and things. So, I mean, it was all done, for the fans. Unfortunately, when big companies take over the Rankin Bass specials, things get done poorly and wrong and without any direction whatsoever. So the Christmas specials are missing sound effects. They have bad edits. They're not even really truly high definition because they didn't go back to the masters to actually make it high definition. I have the 4K versions of Rudolph, Frosty, and Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and they don't look that good. So they didn't do it right. And the extra content is absolutely horrible. The documentary is, if a television can smell, it would definitely stink up the room. And then to my surprise, they used several of my photographs in a film clip without permission. And they said they were going to try to make things right, but so far they haven't. And I talked to my friend Sarah Karloff about that today. So unfortunately, like I said, when big companies take over what they call properties, things go awry, and it's unfortunate. And also, they're talking about doing like a new version of Rudolph for next year. I think they're going to release it on December 6th, which was the date that it turned 60. But if what I saw on the Blu-ray is any indication of what's going to come out, it's really, really bad. And I read that there was some voice actors, like famous people like Robert Downey Jr. and people like that. And they just don't get it, you know, unfortunately. I wish that all the core people of the Rankin Bass group were still here, but unfortunately, all of them have passed away now. Jules Bass last year,
yeah,
and Paul Coker too. So, you know, there'll never be another Rankin Bass Productions. Let's put it that way.
No, absolutely. And let me ask you this too, and Grassia, you can chime in on this as well.
Okay.
So these shows, you know, like you said, there'll never be another Rankin Bass. Now, I like everybody else in the world, I stream, you know, but a lot of my Christmas viewing, I pull out the DVDs. Now, and again, we know that the DVDs are not the best of the best, especially with some of the Rankin Bass specials. But I don't believe any of the big ones like Rudolph, Frosty, Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Are those streaming on anything? Or I don't even know if when do the networks play them? They're like so lost in the shuffle now.
Well, I read a lot of bad information floating around the internet this year talking about this is why the Rankin Bass specials don't stream, which is all bullcrap. They were talking about the music rights and this and that, but that's not true. I think they're just trying to maximize the money that they're making off of the Blu-rays and DVDs, because the Blu-ray set came out on Halloween, and they're trying to get the physical media money in first before they do anything else. And unfortunately, they have a bad product out there. And I see people come in my Rankin Bass groups on Facebook and say, look what I got. I finally got the whole set. And I'm thinking,
they don't.
They just don't know, you know, unfortunately. Then I saw somebody from a museum, the Museum of Broadcast in Chicago, which incidentally closed, saying that because the copyright is wrong on Rudolph, it's in Roman numerals, that the publicity photos from the special are public domain, which is BS. You know, I'm the one that owns most of those photographs, and I license them. And I've had big companies use my photos, and when I called them on it, they paid me, you know, because they know they're not public domain. So there's all kinds of bad information floating around out there, especially at Christmas time.
I remember a couple of years ago, you said that we were talking, and one of the things I remember you mentioning was "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." You said that there was going to be some new stuff coming for that. I think you said they're like little figurines or whatever.
Well, we're still talking about it with Super 7.
Okay.
Hopefully, they're going to do some of the product that has never been out. You know, some of the untapped Rankin Bass specials. But next year is the 50th anniversary of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" and "The Year Without a Santa Claus." And I wasn't going to do another book, but now we're working on a book on that with my friend Justin Beam, who happened to be the guy that came to my home and shot all the extra footage for the Mad Monster Party Blu-ray. He also writes for Remind Magazine, which I write for. And so we're doing that sort of a labor of love, and hopefully it'll be out by the fall of next year.
Gotcha. And you know, you talk about people from the old guard. I mean, talking "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," I don't want to say he's necessarily from the old guard, but I mean, Joel Gray, he's still around. Have you talked to this? And
I asked Sid Croft a few weeks ago to put me in touch with Joel Gray, because he had him on his podcast. And I messaged Joel, but I haven't heard back from him yet. But I'm trying to get him for the book. And not only do I like him from "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," but he had a character on The Lawman called Oni O'Reilly. And it seemed that they were trying to spin him off into his own series. So I want to talk to him about that and see if that was the case and why it didn't happen. It was kind of a comical character that Dan Troop, the marshal, you know, he worked with them, but he was also sort of funny, which is rare in Westerns. You don't have a lot of humor in Westerns. So
yeah, I gotta say, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. You know, that I think by far I mean, like, everybody loves Rudolph, everybody loves Frosty, and I love all those. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas has to be like my favorite one of all of them. And that's a tradition.
The music is so good, and it's solid through the whole special. It seems like I think it's a 25-minute special, but it just flies by because the music kind of carries it, you know.
Oh my, yeah, you couldn't even tell it, you know. But I found the vinyl album too, which is just the whole episode on vinyl.
Right.
It's hilarious, but like you said, like the minute you put it in, it's already over because that music really does just fly through it. My favorite song is Even a Miracle Needs a Hand. That's right. That's the best song. I actually like it, I think, a little bit more when the other mouse sings it at the end, a little quick thing, you know,
right.
Fix the clock. I love that part. We have a question from one of our viewers, obviously an animation fan. This guy's name is Mel Blank 222. Rick, he wants to know, do you think Rudolph still would have been a classic if Bumble killed Donner like he did in the original script? I did not know that Bumble was supposed to.
Yeah, it was.
Well, you know what? I have the original script in my Rudolph book, but it's been a long time since I looked at it. There were other characters in there too that, like, speaking, I think, seals or animals that they got rid of. And the changes were probably made because of Arthur Rankin, and maybe Robert L. May was involved early on. And, you know, they changed up a lot of things. But I don't know. I think the way the script that Romeo Muller wrote that was used was perfect. And I get a lot of people that remember things wrong too. Like, a woman emailed me and said, didn't the Bumble take out, or didn't he have a toothache and Hermey took out his tooth somewhere in the special? And I'm like, where is this coming from? But people must dream about the special and remember things differently. And then they tell their friends, and their friends think it's true, and they get into arguments about it. I get a lot of emails like that. So I don't know. Maybe that was in the original script, because I think there were 3 different versions that I have.
Yeah.
The earliest one I put in my Rudolph book because I thought that was the most interesting. It was so different from what they actually shot.
You know, and I mean, I think a part of that also has to do with there's so many versions of the show they're circulating to.
Right.
Different version that they've seen, you know, and again, with the home video or television releases, they're all out there. So,
last year, just maybe about a week before Christmas, I located a commercial that Rankin Bass filmed with Christmas carolers that was in my Rudolph book. Tony Peters told me about it. He designed the characters, and it came out like a year before Rudolph. And it was important for me to find it because Maury Laws told me the music in it. And when you write music for a commercial back then, it was like a 2-minute commercial for GE. So you had to write a lot of music. And he told me that he developed his Rankin Bass style, the bouncy, fun kind of glockenspiel style from that earlier commercial. And he was listening to the Nutcracker Suite. So he was kind of listening for the instrumentation in that and trying to replicate it somewhat, but also put his own style into it. So that I found last year. And then this year, almost on the same day, I found a photograph of the display that was in the NBC Rockefeller Plaza, 30 Rockefeller Plaza.
And that's where those original puppets came from, right? Those ones
Yeah.
relating.
So this photograph, Bob Pierce sent me the original today. It answers a lot of questions, and I want to show it to you because I had it blown up. It was like a big...
I'm going to give you the full screen for a minute so you can take a look at this. Hold on, let me give you the full screen.
And this will be in our next book coming out in 2024, but it was a big wood case, and there was a cord underneath that plugged into the light socket, and it was built into the wall. And school classes would go to NBC, and many people told me they saw this, and it was up from 64 to 71 because in 1971 Rudolph changed from NBC to CBS. So then they sent the puppets back to Rankin Bass, and that's when Barbara Adams, Arthur's secretary, took them home and gave them to her nephew and nieces. And I wanted to see the photograph because I was talking about the fact that Santa and Rudolph that are in the U.S., they were the publicity only puppets. And so far, the Center for Puppetry Arts hasn't come clean on that. They're still representing them as like they're right out of the special, which they're not. They were made by the same people in Japan, and they have some significant value in, you know, a place in history. They were used for the displays, like when they would set them up to take photographs, and they put them on the Decca record album cover, and they had Burl Ives and Johnny Marks hold their puppets. Johnny held Rudolph and Burl held Sam. But what's interesting about this display is Santa is sitting down, and that's how he was found when we restored him in 2006, when my friend Kevin Christ bought him. He said Santa doesn't stand. He can only sit. His legs are like limp. Well, his legs were always limp because what they did, most likely, Arthur brought one of the animators to New York, and they pegged him up through the snow, through the wood, and put rods up his legs. So this is the Santa that has a much bigger, rounder beard that you see in the photographs, like on the cover of my first version of Rudolph. And, you'll notice that the Bumble isn't in here. Some people said they heard that the Bumble was too big for the case and they had to keep him in the basement in some storage room. I don't know if that's true or not, but he wasn't in any of the publicity photos, though. So more than likely, he never came to New York. Yukon was the biggest puppet in the case. And then there's some elves on the edges here. And one of the elves has the wrong eyes. They look like they're bug-eyed, like white around the black, which that was never in the special. So either his eyes fell off or they just gave him some generic eyes. But the most significant thing about this is the Santa. He never could stand up. He never had wire armature legs that they can animate. So when they restored him, they put something in to make him rigid, so he stands up, and that's the way he is in the Center for Puppetry Arts display. But I told them those are the publicity puppets, and then the Center for Puppetry Arts, I let them use some of my photographs where they wrote about the history and everything. And then they kept using them. And I told them, you know, you need to pay me for what you did before. And then they're not using them anymore. So the display doesn't look so hot. There's nothing around it to really, you know, give you the history and everything. But I didn't know they were the publicity puppets, even when I appeared with them and even when they did the auction and they sold for $368,000. I didn't know. It took a while to figure it all out, as does many things with Rankin Bass. The voice of Karen and Frosty was
all their story.
Yeah. So I didn't know what happened because nobody that I interviewed remembered. So you kind of have to piece things together and figure it out on your own.
Yeah, because I remember when, because again, 2006, that was like really like the Wild West of the internet days. You know, it was the beginning of it. And I remember thinking when they first uncovered those two puppets, and the world went like, oh my God, these are them. But like you said, then the research, and I mean, it's been almost 20 years or so that then finally the truth is out of. And again, but they are cool pieces of memorabilia that will never be replicated. I mean, that's probably the only surviving original Rudolph and Santa from that production, regardless of any kind. I mean, unless someone has one hidden away somewhere. But I mean, the fact they're out there, yeah.
In Japan, the animators hung on to them. So that's how I figured out that the Santa with the decaying beard that I put in my Santa Claus is Coming to Town book and Frosty book is the one that they use for the animation, because when he's talking, his beard's going up and down, and the beard is short, you know, and it's exactly like the one that's in the special. So, and Tad also had Mrs. Claus's head. And I did a seminar yesterday for some movie theaters. And this year, more than ever, I figured that they replaced the heads on, they reused bodies. All they had to do was create a new outfit for them. So that's why Tad had all these heads in a drawer. And sometimes only the head pops up. A guy in Japan has a head from The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, which I put in my book. And back then, when he sent it to me, I thought, why does he only have the head? You know, what happened to the body? But they reused a lot of the bodies and put new clothes on them.
It makes sense. We have a couple of questions. I know, Grassia, you have a couple of questions too, but let's hit the folks that are here.
Audience first, then I'll go.
All right. So we have Money Saving with Mimi. Sounds like a commercial. Anyways, so, and it's funny that Mimi says this. I recently watched Cricket on the Hearth for the first time. What are your thoughts on that cartoon? I thought it was kind of art. I actually I found a copy of that recently, and it's on my stack of Christmas titles to watch. I haven't watched it yet, but let's talk about Cricket on the Hearth.
It's not one of their better specials, but what I like about it is it was part of the Danny Thomas show, which at the time, I don't know if it was a live show yet, because I know the Three Stooges were on with him on Something I Have, or if it was sort of an anthology series, but he hosted at the beginning, and then at the end he goes through the cast in like a book with their still photos, and it's kind of neat in that sense. And he was a good host, you know, Danny Thomas, although he didn't really host the story. He appeared in the story as the main character, Caleb, I think. So what's neat about it is he worked with his daughter at Rankin Bass, and then later his daughter came back and did That Girl in Wonderland, which was part of the ABC Saturday Superstar movie. And they had good people like Hans Conried and Roddy McDowell in the special. The songs are really good. The soundtrack is strong. I even have the demos of all the songs. But the story itself is, I don't know, it's a little weak. And I don't remember if Romeo wrote that one. He probably did. But they were doing so many things at that time. You know, they did The Little Drummer Boy and Mouse on the Mayflower right around the same time. So maybe it suffered a little because of that.
Yeah, I mean, they were churning out, and you know, you're talking about the music there too. Mel Blank had another question. We talked already about the DVD, but he wants to know: do you think we'll ever get a complete Rudolph soundtrack? And I mean, not even just a Rudolph soundtrack. You know, again, CDs are a dying breed. Vinyl's out there, but I mean, definitely, you know, purchasing online music. I'm surprised a lot of like you were talking music rights before too. I'm surprised a lot of these songs are not available for purchase. Like there were soundtracks, like, you know, I talked about the 'Twas the Night Before Christmas album.
Right.
Frosty with June Foray's voice is out there. But again, these things are kind of lost out there in the world. Do you think, or who has the rights to the music? Walt Disney Records had the rights to like the Frosty and 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. That was a Deco with Rudolph. Who has the rights to even the soundtracks now to these things?
I think Sony had quite a few of them. And
the main like four, like, well, the main four, I say, Santa,
yeah,
Frosty, Rudolph, and then Drummer Boy.
when my book first came out in '97, they released a couple of different CDs at that time. One was called Rudolph, Frosty, and Friends, and the other ones were for Nick at Night. My friend David Sheldon did the covers, and they put all the Rankin Bass songs on there. And they basically just took them off of the shows, like right off the mag tracks.
Yeah, like all the dialogue.
Right. Well, some of the dialogue.
Yeah.
And there's better masters than that, because Rankin Bass put out a record album. We call it the Christmas card album, that they gave to their employees and sponsors and networks. And it had unedited tracks where there was no dialogue. So there were master tapes somewhere. And Maury Laws, probably about 15 years ago or 12 years ago, they were going to do a musical of the Rankin Bass songs, you know, kind of like how the Grinch musicals out there and things like that. So he had the producer come to my home, and we went through all my stuff and we talked about it, made plans and everything. This producer worked with Maury on a Cooperstown musical that Dave Winfield hosted. And I wish that would have happened, because maybe that would have resulted in a lot of the songs being released in various ways. But to answer Mel Blank's question, Rudolph does need a full soundtrack with the music cues too, but I haven't found the music cues. That doesn't mean that they're not out there. Yeah. I asked Maury if he had them, but he didn't. But they could be out there. But they really need to do a much better release on the soundtrack than they have, because it's like a budget, you know, $5 CD that isn't even, they didn't even go back to the masters and redo it. It's just like the old Decca record transferred over to CD. So they do need to do a better Rudolph.
Absolutely. Grassia, what did you have?
Well, I grew up with these cartoons just like everyone else. I'm an animator. I'm a cartoonist. I love these things. Very inspired. Used to draw them a lot as a kid. I would be upset if I didn't ask about Paul Coker, and if you could tell me some stuff about him. You know, we obviously know how important he was, but can you share some stories about him and his art, and how and just basically how his work really I guess, I mean, he was designer, so obviously inspired designs, but pulling from these stories, these simple stories, how his work enhanced what the Rankin Bass cartoons really were at the time.
Well, he was a great guy, and we became real close friends over the years. And in fact, he came to Dallas for a Comic-Con that I was going to be at, just to spend time with me. He didn't want to make any money. He was just there to hang out with me and enjoy, some of the fans, seeing fans face to face. But his work is Rankin Bass. It's the look of Rankin Bass. It's the lettering style. Arthur would have him do a variety ad every year for Variety, which was a big paper back then. Everybody looked at it. So his work was significant in that it really captured the style of Rankin Bass as we know it. And that started with Frosty. And I wanted to show you, I just got this yesterday, the new Retro Fan.
Oh, I got to pick that up. I've been wanting to.
And and this one's about Frosty. And I write a Rankin Bass article every year. And there's some of the variety ads right there from Paul Coker. And there's Paul Coker and a drawing he did for me of him and Frosty.
Oh, wow.
And, with Frosty, a lot of people say, why did they go to cell animation? Well, it's two reasons. One is Arthur wanted it to look like a Christmas card. And Paul was working for Hallmark, and he worked for Hallmark for many years. And that was one reason. But the other reason was if they had the stop motion Animagic people working on a project, they couldn't do another project in Animagic. And at that time, they already started working on Santa Claus is Coming to Town. So they went to, you brought up Cricket on the Hearth a little while ago. That was done at Toei. And Toei wasn't a great, they didn't capture the look of Rankin Bass as well as Mushi. And when they got Mushi for
Godzilla movies, right?
I don't think so.
I know there's a tie with Rankin Bass and Godzilla too. I thought it was Toei, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Toho.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the guy who was in the costumes of Godzilla just passed away, and I think he might have been in the costume of King Kong in King Kong Escapes, which was a Rankin Bass film that Arthur was very involved with. I'm going to be appearing with Linda Miller this year in October in Pennsylvania at the Carlisle Comic-Con. And we met up at Chiller before, and we became fast friends because she was Arthur's friend. We shared a friendship with Arthur, and I guess she doesn't know many people that had a friendship with Arthur. So we became good friends. But getting back to Mushi captured Paul Coker's style perfectly. So they used them again for like the Festival of Family Classics and the Reluctant Dragon and Mr. Toad show. And those look like Paul Coker's artwork to a T, So he was very, very important in the world of Rankin Bass, and he was very, very modest. He, when he would talk about things, it was just like, this was just something he did. And he did tell me, though, that whenever he would say he worked on Frosty, other people would be like, whoa, like that was the thing that caught their attention. Not that he worked for Mad Magazine or drew for Hallmark. And then he was a great lover of Jack Davis's art. And they shared rooms on the Mad trips and everything, so they were real friendly. And he was real complimentary of Jack's work.
Mhm.
And sometimes I would ask Paul to draw something, and he would tell me that I should do it, that I draw just as good as him, and I don't think that's the case. You can't really capture his style because he had a very unique style, and he used to use a Quokill pen,
Yeah.
like some kind of an ink pen that you dab in the inkwell, and nobody used that back then. He had sort of a broken line style to his art.
Mhm.
And Arthur told me the reason he got Paul was his artwork was more animatable than Jack Davis's, which is true. Jack Davis had a more sort of a humorous illustration where it was painterly and things. So it was kind of hard to translate that to animation, but Paul Coker was perfect for it.
I can see that with his style. I've following. I've seen his work through Mad. I've seen his work all over the place. I honestly, I don't know if I've seen his Hallmark cards. Like really looked for them. I wasn't familiar with his background with Hallmark, but I was familiar with his background with Mad. And you're just, I mean, you're right about the broken line style and everything that I see. I look at his work, and this is going to sound weird. Maybe other artists can understand this, but like I can like smell the ink. I could like smell the paper, the wash that he uses. Like when I look at his work, I could feel like I'm in the room standing over his shoulder. And not a lot of artists do that for me, you know?
Yeah.
And there's always something special about his work to me. And
yeah, you know, him and Jack Davis, they're the reason that I became the historian for Rankin Bass, because my degree was in illustration, and when I got out of college, I wanted to be like Jack Davis, where, you know, I would call him up and I sent him my work to see what he thought of it, and that's really what I was kind of planning to do with my life. And then the fact that the two of them were involved with Rankin Bass kind of intrigued me. And then from there, it was like it was a calling, because when I called Arthur Rankin, he just said, I told him there really needs to be a book. And he said, send me 2 chapters. So I sent him 2 chapters and he liked it. And then ever since, this is what I've been doing. Wow. So I think the art background helped, though, because Arthur was an artist as well. And he really appreciated Jack and Paul. And we had that in common. And their work is so artsy to me. The design of everything is so well done. Even the most simple things, the early stuff like Rudolph and Willie McBean, Tony Peters designed that. And Tony was just this kid that worked in Arthur's home as an artist. He was the in-house artist, and he was working on a lot of commercials with Rankin Bass. And he told me Arthur always just thought of him as a kid. And when Rudolph came about, Tony had already left, but Arthur called him back and he worked freelance on Rudolph. And he said that was the last project that he worked on. And then he went on to like Sesame Street and some other things with his own art studio. So, I mean, these guys were all talented artists involved with Rankin Bass.
And, you know, you're sitting there talking about Paul's work too. Like, because I'm just looking at because Rankin Bass did have quite a collection of films, and like I know Grassia talk about The Hobbit, and Paul I don't think directly worked on The Hobbit, but you see in a lot of the other Rankin Bass things that followed, some of that style, that look kind of was still there a little bit. So I'm guessing the other artists looked at him and be like, this has now become that Rankin Bass
right
look.
And plus, they were using Japanese studios, that they had a certain look too, and brought in their art style. If you look at Santa Claus is Coming to Town, which was designed by Paul, when they get to the "My World is Beginning Today" sequence and it goes to cell animation, that looks anime, like she's right out of Speed Racer. So they kind of brought their stuff into it. And something I was thinking about last night as I was trying to get some sleep, they always ask, when I did the movie seminar yesterday, why do you think these have lasted so long? And I always talk about the writing, Romeo Muller, because there's a lot of heart and warmth, and he didn't write for kids, you know, he was writing for everybody. And nobody does that today. And it seems like the animation of today, they're writing for teenagers or people in high school, or, you know, with the kind of the raunchy humor. And they're not writing for like small kids and grandparents and that. So grandparents get turned off by that, and small kids shouldn't be watching that. But I thought last night, you know what? I never talk about the Japanese animators, because they took the designs and then they created a world that you believe. You know, you really believe that Hermey and Rudolph are out in a snowstorm, and you know, all of the things, all of the sets and the world that they created is so believable. So the Japanese animators really deserve a lot of the credit for the longevity of it, because I wouldn't watch them if I didn't like the way they looked. I have to like the design of the characters, and I have to like the overall style of the show to keep watching it, you know, as an artist. If it had great writing but it looked like crap, I'm not going to watch it. So I think the Japanese deserve a lot of the credit too.
You know, and you know, you mentioned that you know, about this longevity of it too, and it's hard. Like, we are in this world where we're just on this like this overload of all kinds of media. Like I work in a school, and like I could talk to my teenage students, and so many of them have never even seen any of these cartoons. You know,
right?
Like, you know, and it's just I'm gonna go back to Mel Blanc. Mel Blanc had another comment here, but I want to play into that. So they wrote, I missed the Rankin Bass merch from Playing Mantis Memory Lane merch. Now has Bumble wearing scarves and hats with same poses, and but that's the thing, is like people recognize them more from, I guess, the novelty items that are out there now, like, you know, the Bumble wearing hats and scarves, and you know, the inflatable things, because like even there's like the talk about Paul here. There's a Frosty, the snowman, like inflatable that you see at this time of the year, who kind of looks like the Rankin Bass one. I guess it is the Rankin Bass one. It has like the same lettering and all that. It's kind of, but it's not quite there. So that's where people, I think, know Frosty and the Bumble and some of these other characters from, but they really don't. They know them, but they don't know them. And I think that's lost in the translation now.
Well, the attention span is so short today. Like you said, there's all this media, and I think it's the phone age that's really changed the whole culture. But thankfully, because I do this all year long, and I write books and I sell books, thankfully a lot of people get it, and it's old and young. You know, there's people out there, once they see them, then they want to keep seeing them, and they're special to them, and they want stuff, and they want to read about it, and they want to really delve into it. And there's a big collecting phenomenon with these Rankin Bass. There was nothing until my book came out, and then the guy from Stuffins called me up and said he got the idea to do beanbag dolls at CVS pharmacies from my book. After that, it's all over the place, you know? And unfortunately, going back to what Mel Blanc said, they're putting Rudolph on everything, cereal, and putting scarves and hats on him and stuff. And I think that's ridiculous. They're just milking the hell out of it, and really, I would say, abusing the character in so many ways. You know, they really should focus on quality merchandise and get in with good companies, not stuff that you see in the dollar store.
Yeah.
But again, they really, all they care about is the revenue that it's generating. And that's true with the Blu-rays and DVDs too. They really don't care about the content. All they care about is the bottom line. So I guess I'm here to try to change that a little bit. And my main function is to shine the light on the people that made Rudolph last 60 years and made the Year Without a Santa Claus last 50 years. So I don't understand it because I'm coming from a totally different perspective. I like the art of it and the people behind it. And I don't care about stuff that you see in the dollar store that is abusing the characters.
Some kind of cool Rudolph merch. I mean, and I know we talked about this, I think it was last year or the year before. You know, the unfortunate thing is that some of these people, you know, are really not, obviously not around anymore, that never really got the true credit where credit was due. And I'm just thinking, you know, I'll throw out with Rudolph here, like Billy Richards and Paul Souls. You know, like here are these iconic characters. And I was fortunate. I met Paul Souls, gosh, you know, a few years ago, obviously, you know, and I had him sign a Hermey photo for me, but, you know, like iconic, but just like kind of lost in the shuffle.
Well, Billy May, when I first tried to reach her, her agent said that she didn't want to talk about Rudolph. And that she felt like Rankin Bass had, you know, slighted her. And, you know, some years went by, maybe 4 or 5 years. We were on the same radio shows in Canada, at first separately. And then at some point I got a hold of her and her whole attitude changed, where she knew she was going to be remembered for Rudolph, and she just embraced it. And then I would send her all the toys that were coming out, and she loved them. She just loved talking about it. And she, you know, took my books around and showed them to everybody. So I think by the end of her life, she did realize that she was an iconic character and she'd be remembered forever, which is nice. You know, not many people can say that. And I think a lot of the others did realize it after my books came out. And they felt like that I was always going to be their big supporter. And I would keep, Arthur said towards the end of his life that he wanted it to live on, and he knew it would live on through what I was doing. So I think they all kind of did realize eventually that they were going to be remembered for this stuff forever.
Well, you know, and that's the thing too. I think, you know, you mentioned Billy. You know, I think out of the whole Christmas saga, if you will, you know, I always look at the Rankin Bass things as like the MCU of Christmas movies,
right?
But you know, so Billy, Jackie Vernon, Mickey Rooney. I mean, I think they got the most mileage out of those actors because they're the only ones that and you know, we'll throw Fred Astaire in there because he did the Easter Bunny movie too,
right?
Character, but I mean, like they were the longevity. They were what connected. You know, like, I mean, Billy was really like the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man of of the series,
right?
But they connected it all. So I mean, obviously they Rankin Bass knew they were doing something right with those actors too, because they kept coming back to them. I mean, Mickey Rooney even did that non-Rankin Bass sequel with Heatmiser and Snowmiser.
Right. A friend of mine said he went up to Mickey Rooney with, I think, the laser disc of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And my friend is a cameraman at Fox News. and he told them, he said, at first he didn't want to do Santa Claus is coming to town, but he's glad that he did because he knew like how well done it was and how it resonated with fans, and it actually captured a generation of fans that would have not remembered Mickey Rooney. You talk about the Rankin Bass specials with today's audience. Look at the old movies that, you know, from the 40s, that there's very few people that know them all and still watch them. But, you know, they're great movies, quality movies. But like Howdy Doody has aged out now, too. There was lots of Howdy Doody merchandise on eBay years ago. It would go for a fortune. But all of those people are kind of dying off now. But the good thing about Rankin Bass is they're still showing them on AMC. Yeah. They're showing them on Freeform. They're still on the networks. They beat Peanuts and Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol and How the Grinch Stole Christmas aren't on the networks anymore. They're on, but not the main networks, which probably won't be the main networks in the near future. But Rankin Bass beat them all. Yeah. And that's, you know, something that they achieved. And still, the younger generations, even though your students and people at the school don't know the specials, I do get young people who come up at conventions and things, and they love them, you know.
What's not to love? It's funny that you mentioned AMC because I crack up now. So in the morning when I put the TV on, you know, I put the guide on, and nothing at 5:30, nothing like at 5:30 wanted to watch Jack Frost. 30 a.m. Jesus. I was on this morning. I think AMC had it on at 5:30 this morning. I'm like, geez, who wants to watch that now?
Well, Jack Frost, I watch on Groundhog Day.
That's more of a
Groundhog. And same with the Leprechaun's Christmas Gold, I watch on St. Patrick's Day. So, I mean, they have a special for all the holidays.
They did. They did. Grassia, what else did you have?
I have a couple of other questions. I'll see what we can get to. But first, I just want to, first of all, I got to say, it's a pleasure speaking with you and hearing you talk about all this because, you know, like I said, this was something that influenced me as a kid. It obviously influenced you so much you became a historian of the, you know, of the company. What is your favorite Rankin Bass, you know, special or cartoon or, you know?
Well, I think Rudolph and Mad Monster Party would have to be my favorite, but I really love Santa Claus is Coming to Town. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, The Year Without a Santa Claus. So I like a lot of them, but if I had to pick one, it would be Rudolph because of the simplicity of the characters. And I also like Willie McBean and his Magic Machine, which they shot simultaneously with Rudolph. And they also have Tony Peters' designs. And they kind of came out of the New Adventures of Pinocchio, which was the first Animagic series that Rankin Bass did. So those three kind of have a similar look to them that I like. They have more, I think Tony worked for UPA, and so did Don Duga, who was the storyboard designer for Rankin Bass. And I kind of like UPA because they let the artists do the designs and the animation rather than coming up with a one style look. You know, Arthur always used to talk about, let's make it look like Disney. He never wanted to look like Disney. He wanted to look like Rankin Bass. So Tony Peters has that sort of UPA early Rankin Bass look that I like.
Very nice. The other question, well, actually, you know what? I'm gonna hold off a minute because it's not really on about the Christmas shows. I gotta say I'm a huge Mad Monster Party fan.
Yeah.
I think that is. Well, I think we have another question from the audience. I'd like.
Well,
to
no,
make sure
it
we
kind
get
of actually it kind of went with it kind of went with what you just said about about Nestor touching a movie. I always tear up when I watch it. Which one do you think is the most touching? So, you know, kind of relevant to what you were asking too. So, you know, and again, all these cartoons, these movies had heart to them, regardless. You know, and that goes back to Romeo Mueller, who I just want to go out there. I don't know if I shared this with you before, but Grassia, I don't know if you knew this. Romeo Mueller lived. So I live up in the Hudson Valley. He lived up here too when he passed away.
Right.
Yeah,
High Falls.
Yep. So I remember reading in the newspaper, and my father was like, "Oh wow," and it sticks to me today because the local newspaper did a little article about him when he had passed, which is interesting.
Yeah, Arthur called me up. One of the earliest calls I got from Arthur was from Romeo's. He had just gone to Romeo's memorial, and his brother Gene told me that Arthur came. And Arthur and Romeo had a falling out at some point. That's why Romeo went and did his own thing with the Little Rascals Christmas special. He did some strawberry shortcake things. I think Puff the Magic Dragon and some other things like that. And I think he was in the advertisement for these things or publicity. He was playing up the Rankin Bass angle, and Arthur didn't like that too much, and they had sort of a falling out, but I guess they patched everything up before he passed. And it was significant that Arthur went to his memorial and really thought the world of Romeo. So yeah, he's an unsung hero. That's why I'm always talking about him, because he was a genius out of High Falls. And I think it came from his love of old comedies and love of old movies. He used to screen old movies at his home, and he just kind of learned from that and brought that into the Rankin Bass world. You know, that quality of Laurel and Hardy and the R Gang comedies and all of that stuff kind of made it into the Rankin Bass world through his love of that.
Yeah, and I mean, and it shows. Like, and again, the comedy, the little jokes that they had, they're all like those little nuances. They were all present.
Right.
You know, even though they weren't Rankin Bass things, all those other specials that you mentioned that he worked on, you know, because he brought his touch to it. You know, it kind of felt like a Rankin Bass special. There was something about Puff the Magic Dragon or Strawberry Shortcake, or like you said, the Rascals, where you didn't know at the time. I was like, this could have been a Rankin Bass cartoon. But just
well, he did a Christmas special. I think there was a Golden Book. Noel.
Yeah, I remember.
And a lot of people talk about that. And I think he used to go on the radio in your area and read the book. Mm-hmm. And he went to schools and read the book. So a lot of people think Noel is a Rankin Bass special too. So yeah, it has the same, I guess, heart and warmth to it that Romeo brought.
It's in good company.
Yeah.
So Grassia, what was the other question? Was it Monster Party or Hobbit?
You know what? I'm gonna stay away from those right now.
Okay.
Because you know what? I think it could be a whole other discussion that we could do another time. So I want to ask you just one last question, because all of us here are obviously fans of Rankin Bass, and we were talking earlier, and you were mentioning about how, you know, a younger audience doesn't really know these characters except on the merchandise. Do you have any thoughts on how we can bring a younger audience and get these great stories back in their hands and in their viewing, when we are only seeing them, like you mentioned, on Freeform, which, by the way, I don't get. on my cable station. So I only watch these on the DVDs I own. You know, so
Yeah.
without getting, you know, how can we get kids, you know, to you know, see the magic of these stories again?
And you know, just to add on to that too, with what you're saying, because I know Rick, you mentioned that, but you know, I don't think it's depending if they did it, how they did it or not. But I mean, at some point they are going to redo all these films, right?
Yeah.
So how do we get these young people the opportunity to see these things before they get lost in the reboots or remakes, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's not.
Once
It's easier said than
forget about it.
It's easier said than done, because even if it was streaming and they had it available, that doesn't mean they're going to watch it. And the stories move at an older pace, you know, with very carefully plotted and so forth. I don't think things today are done that way. They're even if you look at trailers, you know, just a trailer for any movie, I noticed a trend going back like 20 years, back when my first book came out, that there's like a loud boom in between every shot, and the shots get shorter in trailers. They're like 2 or 3 seconds long, and things are getting darker, less colorful, and it's just a whole different world. So I don't know that, other than parents showing the kids the shows and saying, this is what I love, and maybe they latch onto it from there. I don't think they're just going to gravitate towards it just because it's a quality show, because look at what's popular today. A lot of things aren't quality, but they're popular, you know. I couldn't name one Taylor Swift song, but she's selling out stadiums, and they're paying, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars for tickets. Why? I have no idea. But
if Taylor Swift tells Swifties to watch Rankin Bass cartoons, they will. There you go. There's your answer.
Right. That's probably it. That's the answer right there. If somebody does bring it up and it goes viral, then maybe they'll watch it. But other than that,
yeah. I mean, it's such a great legacy. It's a great library. And again, like outside of the Christmas stuff, I know there's a whole other wealth of things. Hobbit, Reluctant Dragon, Thundercats, Silverhawks, all that good stuff. That
right.
Somehow, you know, so there's a whole world of it. But I mean, it really all started. It all started with a reindeer, right? You got Disney. It all started.
Yeah, there's fans of everything that they did, including even the low budget movies that Arthur made for ABC Friday night movies, like the Bermuda Depths and The Last Dinosaur and some of those things. There's fans for those things because, you know, maybe it brings back great memories of when they were growing up and they watched that movie and it made an impression and so on and so forth. But I think Rudolph and Frosty and all the big ones, they're just going to be around forever because they really became part of Christmas now. Like putting a tree up or lights outside. You have to watch them to get into the spirit of the holiday. Absolutely. And it really, that's even for me, you know, because I'm constantly sending out orders and signing books and seeing this stuff. I never get sick of it because when I can really just sit down and relax and watch the show and pay attention to it, there's a magic there, you know, and I could never write about the magic. I can't put into words why this is so special. It just is, you know, and you can't replicate it. And when I see like this, they're calling it 4D Rudolph, You know, like there's some extra levels of sensory perception with it. You're never going to create that magic again. You can't go back and copy it. It's impossible.
You know, and I think that's what it comes down to, is there's that warmth, and you said it's a place that people can go to. And again, times are different, generations are different for people all of our ages. Maybe it brings us back to a simpler time, a good memory, you know, and that's why. And that's why your books continue to do well, and people want to get all those things, and people want to talk to you, and people watch shows, is because, you know, there's so much chaos and nonsense going on in the world. You know, why not escape for a little bit, you know, with Rudolph or Frosty, you know, because you know what it is, and you're safe there. You know that they're gonna redeem the Bumble. You know Professor Hinkle is not gonna get that. You know, so there's something good about that. You know, I want to throw one quick last question. I know you have some other interviews tonight, so thank you for getting us in here. But you said you watch these shows, you know, and you can sit back, relax, and watch these shows. And I'm sure you have seen all of these hundreds of times, right? So, are you, as you're writing and watching again, are you still finding new things every time you watch these shows?
Yeah, and I write about them. No matter if, say, I'm writing a book on The Year Without a Santa Claus and 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, but I found this photograph of the Rudolph display. That's going in the book, because I'm learning things and finding things over time that answer questions I had back, 20 years ago. Yeah. And I do find new things and find out about things from other people, even, people find things and then they tell me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. There's a scene in The Year Without a Santa Claus when Tanta Kringle is singing The First Toy Maker to the King, and there's a bozo push puppet up on the toy shelf. An actual push puppet. Yeah. They did that in Thunderbirds too. They used some push puppets in their Christmas episode. So things like that, I never really noticed before until you see a still photo that somebody shares on Facebook, and it's like, oh wow. So there is a lot of neat trivia in the Rankin Bass specials and films that I'm finding out about over time.
Yeah. So, Grassia, do you have any final thoughts before we head out of here?
No, I just want to thank Rick for doing everything he's doing to keep Rankin Bass alive and sharing the knowledge out, because it was a great part of my childhood and memories. And like you said, there's a lot of warmth in the stories, and there's heart in there, and someone like me who is a comic and animation geek, these are things I want to pick up, I want to read, I want to learn more about. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I do find there's a lot of connections that I've made over the years with artists and actors and just people at conventions, not necessarily there as guests, just people visiting, that I've connected with because of Rankin Bass. It does mean a lot to everybody. My friend Shag just did some like a Heatmiser and Snowmiser inspired mask. And next year we're going to try to do a Year Without a Santa Claus event. And, I never would have knew Shag had I not been the Rankin Bass historian, because it means something to him. It's a special thing to him. And it's the same with everybody. It's really a nice thing to be part of. And that's something like, that's a reward that I get from it. That's not just a financial reward.
Yeah.
There's so many people that just enjoy it the same way that I do that we become fast friends. So I can understand what you're saying.
Absolutely. I just want to wrap up here. Mel Blank says, such a great stream. Hope everyone has a Merry Christmas. Mel, thank you for joining in and your questions tonight. That was great.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
So Rick, people, I have it here on the bottom here. Go to rankinbass.com. Very easy. Your
or
books,
Miser Bros.
Or Miser Brothers. Obviously, it's probably too late to get your books for Christmas now, but you ship them year round, so anybody could get any of those books at any time of the year to enjoy the magic of Christmas 12 months a year.
Yeah.
And then so you're on a bunch of podcasts. I guess people can find you on your social media, and you'll be advertising where else you'll be in the next few days. I know you're going right on to something after us here. And then I just want to quickly go. You said you're going to be in Pennsylvania. When is that?
Third week of October. So the week before Chiller. And Jackson Bostwick, who's my friend, Shazam, it's the 50th anniversary. So it kind of revolves around his appearance there.
Okay.
But then I have the Rudolph anniversary of 60 years. So that's a pretty big one. And who knows what I'll bring there.
Nice. And then are you going to be at Chiller then too? Is that the plan after that? You'll be
possibly. I don't know. Sometimes we skip a year.
Gotcha.
But we'll see. I'd like to do it. That's my favorite show.
Yeah, that is a great show, and always a lot of great people, great fans that come out there, but so many great talents that are there as well too.
Right.
So Rick, we're gonna wrap up. Thank you again for doing this, and then we'll talk off at backstage in a minute, anyways. So thank you so much for doing this yearly tradition. It's always fun to have you and talk Rankin Bass cartoons. I love it. Grassia, good to have you with us tonight for this.
Great to be back.
This chat. And everybody at home, again, have a great holiday season, great Christmas, great New Year, and we'll be back with IncrediChat in the new year. Check out Get In Toon. Check out Rick, and we will see you all very soon. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.